Okay, as you can see, I am back from Kentucky, back to the old study. So the camera's better, and I've got all my tools, which is good. Father's still doing fine, so no complications. He's pretty much through it now, which is good. Um, this is week 10 of 12. So we've got this week, next week, and the week after. So I went ahead and put onto Moodle the entire schedule from here on out. Okay, I'll go ahead and share that, and we can take a look. Okay, so let me scoot over to Moodle. Okay, so we are in week 10, as it shows here. The reading assignment's chapter 11 on exception handling. We're not going to go into great detail on some of the sections. I'll go through that today, what is and what is not important. Homework assigned below is due on Sunday night, as always. We'll have office hour Zoom on both Tuesday and Thursday at 7 this week. Okay, to get down to the end, it's important to take time to meet a little more often if we can. Okay. As always, there's a forum for questions if you have any questions, and there's the homework. On the homework, I originally had picked a problem from the book. I don't like any of those problems. Okay, so instead I've just made up a problem basically. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. Just create an application that allows a user to add, subtract, multiply, or divide any two numbers. Those should be integers. Input by the user. Start with the menu or menu type. You can just ask questions, which is basically going to ask the user, do you want to add, subtract, multiply, or divide? After that, you want to ask for two integers and then display the results. Okay. And since this is the chapter on exceptions, make sure that your program will catch any errors, such as division by zero, if they enter a zero for the second number in a division, or if you enter a number and they enter Bob. Okay, that does different kinds of errors. We'll talk about that. The chapter talks about that. So that should be relatively straightforward. Okay. Beyond that, next week we're skipping 12 and 13 on graphic stuff and moving on to 14. Again, if we had more time, we could cover a lot more, but I'm trying to get a reasonable set. I think adding graphics at this point would not serve anyone's purpose. So instead, we're going to hit another important topic that we've only kind of glanced at, and that's strings, characters, and then new to us will be regular expressions. Okay. So the homework's out there. I think there are a couple of problems. They're kind of smaller problems than some of the ones that were in the current chapter. Again, there's a forum out there for that. And some folks have asked if you want to work on stuff early, you are free to do so. I mean, you've got your schedule coming up, so you'll be able to figure out from what you need to do, when you need to do it, all that stuff. Okay. The only thing is, in the next week is I've got topic. It should say actually week 12. You get the idea. Week 12, the last week, final exam week, all the homework assignments have to be turned in by Tuesday night. Okay, there's no homework that week. So that means even though the homework from chapter 14 will be due on Sunday night, I should give you a little more time. So Tuesday is the real deadline. That means if you've got an extension in the past for me or something else, you've talked to me about something, there's homework out there. Everything has to be turned in by Tuesday night. That's, I think, the 3rd or the 4th, whatever date that is. I think it's the 3rd. Okay, so I have time to grade it. Okay. So office hours will be that night, Tuesday night at 7. There'll be a review video that week. There'll be a video next week as well. Okay, on probably Sunday or Monday. Okay. So on the final exam, we've talked about it. So these are going to be the choices again. We can go through the pros and cons. You can take either 3 1-hour exams. There'll be 3 programs. You can take an hour for each problem. Okay. Or you can take 1 3-hour exam and do all 3 problems. The advantages to doing the 3 exams is that you can spread those out and not have to have 3 hours of uninterrupted time. The disadvantage is you can't borrow time from one question onto the other. Okay. So then the advantages and disadvantages for the 3-hour kind of reverse. The disadvantage is that you have to block out 3 times of uninterrupted time to be able to work on it. But the advantage is that if you take a half hour on problem 1, you can then take an hour and a half on problem 2. Okay. You'll have the option to take either one. You can't take both. It'll be the same test. If you try to take it again, it's going to raise some flags and it will not be a good thing. And I may not count either one if you do that. So don't do that. So make sure that you're real clear, and I'll try to label it very clearly. And if you have questions, let me know. You will either select the 3-hour exam or you will select over the course of the open period, 3 1-hour exams, okay? And there is no way. If you take the 1-hour exam and you're done early, you can't add that. It's not how Moodle works, okay? And the final exam, I can't give you a weekend to do it. I don't know if that helps or hurts, but the class ends on Friday, the 6th. So it's going to be, the exam should be available Wednesday morning, probably 9 or 10 at the latest. And you can take it anytime through Friday at midnight, let's say. But they have to be turned in by Friday. Everything has to be turned in by Friday. Well, homework has to be turned in by Tuesday. This has to be turned in by Friday, okay? Then the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly before we get to the lecture for the week is the final project, okay? So again, the final project, the first part of that, and I probably should move that down, the project discussion, okay? So basically everyone needs to, as part of your final project, go ahead and do this, okay? So you want to describe the kind of project you're thinking about doing. That way others can kind of weigh in, can help you out with resources. I've already seen some of that happen. I can give some feedback if I think it's really a bad idea, or if I have other resources that you could help with. You can do that, but make sure everybody should respond to those. And it's not a bad idea to go ahead and read everybody's, kind of get an idea what people are doing, okay? So that's part of your assignment to do that. So make sure everyone does that, okay? And I haven't read all of them because there are a few new ones today, okay? And then as far as the final project itself, okay? And again, this is open to suggestions or improvements or questions or whatever you have. Okay, so the idea here is that we're going to create a lesson plan to teach some aspect of what we've covered in this class, something that you would teach to your students. Okay, so if you're a high school teacher, then that's pretty much going to be Java, I would guess, unless you've got a good idea that doesn't involve Java, but that's probably what we're thinking about, some coding at least. Elementary school teachers probably going to use something like Scratch or some other techniques or tools that you know about. Okay, that's more appropriate. It could even be teaching them how to sort using playing cards or blocks or whatever you want to do. Okay, if you teach middle school, then it really could go either way. I mean, if you teach like 6th through 8th graders, there's a world of difference between 6th graders and 8th graders, as I'm sure you guys that teach that know. So just do something that you think is going to work for your students. Okay, and again, first you have to make sure that you've posted in the forum that I just showed you, and then you will need to turn in a lesson plan. And you want to use the Virginia Education Department, the Open Education Library. It's called something. I'll figure it out and put it in there. But you guys all know it's where you have to do a portfolio for this whole process, this whole program that you're in, the whole certification thing, the CS stars. It'll be that format. And someone had posted asking for the blank form for that, and there was an issue. And I don't know how to help, but hopefully somebody does. So read through those responses to see if anybody can help that person out. Okay. And you'll also need to submit a video of approximately 15 minutes where you will explain your lesson. Okay. You don't have to teach it to somebody else. You just have to explain to other teachers, like a professional development thing. Okay. And again, you can use Zoom for that. If you go into Zoom, you can start a new video and just record it from there. And then once you're done, make sure you save it. It'll save it to your computer. You can then upload it. Okay. You can use other tools if you prefer. Zoom is not special. Just make sure it's in MP4 format or in a format that is commonly available. Okay. If you want to edit your video, you can. You don't have to be super, super picky about it. A few bobbles are not going to cause me any trouble at all. Okay. So again, if you have questions about that, make sure that you let me know. Okay. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about as far as class business. Let me check here. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, and all that again is due August 4th at midnight. Okay. And if possible, I'll put those videos out where people can see them. I don't know that I can do that necessarily, but I'm going to try. Okay. Unless for some reason you don't want yours to be seen. If you're in the witness protection program or something, let me know. It happens. Okay. Okay, so that leaves us then to talk about this week's stuff, which is going to be on exception handling. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to Eclipse for that. Stop sharing first. Maybe not. I'm going to do it anyway. I'll skip it at the desktop actually, because sometimes there are pop-ups that we need. Okay, so over in Eclipse, what I've done here, I've started with figure 11.2 in the book. Okay, I can tell you what page it's on here in a second. This is basically, it starts on page 457. Okay, so, and this isn't the whole thing, but it's most of it. With this, the idea is that we're going to have a program that has this quotient method. Okay, the quotient method is going to take a numerator, denominator, and return the division. Notice this is an integer division, so it's not going to return any fractional portions. Okay, so the issue here is that this has a couple of issues here. There's a possible division by zero error, also an invalid input. An invalid input error we have to worry about if they type in letters or other things, okay, or commas or things it doesn't like, okay? So this doesn't do any testing. So it's going to show us what the errors are, which can be useful. We'll also look at how we should be reading these errors, okay? The book hasn't talked about that yet. So we have our public static void main, okay, that's going to basically ask the user for a numerator as an integer, a denominator as an integer, okay? Then it's going to use a scanner to get that, okay? And then it's going to get a result here by calling the quotient method with the numerator and denominator that you just did, okay? It's then going to print out the results, okay? So if we run this, start the first time with, say, 5, 2, and it tells us the result 5 divided by 2 is 2. Okay, it is 2 in integers. It's 2 1/2 or 2.5 if it were a double, but it's not. Okay, so that's okay. So the first thing we have to worry about is the division by zero error. So we're going to go ahead and for that one, enter a 5 and a 0. Okay, we see that we have an issue here. Okay, and what it gives us here is an exception. So an exception just means that it's an error in a running program. Okay, as the book says, we want our program to be robust and fault tolerant. Okay, we want it to be able to handle the errors and allow the user another chance if possible. If not, we want to exit gracefully and tell the user we're exiting and go back to a command prompt and not go back to some unstable condition that could cause issues. Right now, the program I just ran did not end gracefully. Okay, it threw up a bunch of code on the screen that students don't really know where that's at. Okay, and this is what the book talks about later. It's the exception stack. Okay, and the first thing we get here is that we have an issue on line 6. Okay, if we look at our program up here, line 6 is this numerator denominator split. Okay, where we're dividing it. So it is because this number is equal to 0. That's going to be our division by 0 error. Okay, so that's the error that we're getting here. Okay, and then we're getting from this other line, line 18 is the line we were at before we called it. So we're calling it here, and it's actually having the error up there. So 18 is where it's called, 6 is where the error actually occurs. Okay, so we've got a problem with our code, right? So we need to fix it. So let's look at some of the ways that we can fix it. Okay, and this is in section 11.3. Oh, we have the other kind of error. Sorry, there's one more. I'll run it again. This time enter a 5, but we do it like a 1. Okay, different kind of error. Okay, this time we have the input mismatch exception error. Okay, and then it's going to give us all kinds of stuff here from the scanner, from everything else. This is in the scanner itself issue. Okay, so this is an issue that we've sent it the wrong thing. Okay, unless it automatically takes care of us, which sometimes it does. If I do something like that, I'm going to get the same error. Okay, I try to do a double. Okay, so those errors again are coming in line 13 in this case. Okay, where I'm entering on this scanner.nextInt. It's this nextInt that's throwing the error. So up in here in the nextInt, okay, and next is the superclass. We've got the throw for, the nextInt. Okay, those are all of the kind of the hierarchy, the class hierarchy of those. Okay, but it's line 13 in our program that's causing us the trouble. Okay, so we have to figure out a way to handle all these issues. Okay, and we're going to do this in a couple of phases. The book goes through one big chunk, but let's think about what we're doing here. Okay, the main thing here, we're going to do a try block. Okay, and what this try block is going to do for us, okay, it's going to allow us to check for there to be any exceptions and do something about them. Okay, and this is basically figure 11.3 on page 460. So let's look what this try block does for us and everything that's going to happen. Okay, and the try starts here with this please enter an integer numerator. Okay, and then we've got the please enter an integer denominator. All that's correct. Okay, we're going to get the result, we're going to print it out, we're going to close our scanner. Okay, so all this is exactly the same as it was before, but we're saying here inside of this, so that's our try. Our try is going to be that bit of code. So if at any point during that try we get an exception, we're going to try to handle it. Okay, we handle it with one or more catch statements. Okay, so the first catch that we have is going to be on the one if we type in the wrong format, a string or a decimal or something like that. Okay, and if you remember, that was the input mismatch exception. Okay, and then we tend to put in just the same name with a small I, because that's going to be the actual message that we'll be able to print out. Okay, so when we catch this first one, we're going to use a system.error. Okay, and we're going to print out a new line character, say exception. Then we're going to print out a string, and we're going to print out a new line character. Okay, these are all in quotes. And then the string that we're going to print out there is going to be this input mismatch exception. Okay. So it doesn't like something, what doesn't it like? Oh, I need a semicolon there, should be good. Okay, what doesn't it like here? Input cannot be resolved to a type. It's very interesting. I think I got this issue before, and I don't know if it's an issue with our version of Java that we're using. I guess that's possible. Input mismatch exception. Yeah, I don't know why that's unhappy. There's nothing else. Oh, because I have to import it. There we go. When in doubt, look what you need to import. I'm going to import java.util.input mismatch exception. Okay. Now that's happy. Now it doesn't like something here. Okay, it should be system.error.printf. That's what I'm missing there. And so instead of system.out, system.error. Okay, that's the error printf. This is the regular printf, and that's the input mismatch exception. Okay, and what we're going to see here is that we don't have to do that for the arithmetic exception. That's built in. It's always going to be there. So always forget we have to add those in. So if you're using an exception that's not one of the standard ones, if it gives you the error it just got you, then look and you'll have to include that. They're all in the java.util. Okay. So if we were to run this now, okay, the 0 exception is not going to change. So if we do a 5-0, we're still going to get the same exception. Okay, but we should get a different message if we were to enter Bob. Okay, then it's a little nicer, and we could do more than that. The message is giving us here, it's not all that crazy line number stuff we were getting before. Okay, instead it's giving what we just said. Okay, it's printing out exception, it's printing out the Java util dot input mismatch exception, which is exactly where it's coming from. Okay, so so that's the basic idea there. Okay, so this is not giving us a chance to fix it, by the way. Okay, we're going to get to that, but that's the first thing that we need to do here. Okay, so what you can do here, we'll try actually do it, man. So let's go back to this. We can't fix it now, okay, because we'll talk about it because of that. I'm getting ahead of myself today. Okay, so the other thing we're going to catch is going to be the arithmetic exception. Okay, did I spell that wrong? It's kind of the issue. I didn't have to. Why can't I click? There we go. Okay. So that's fixed that part of it. Okay. And then in a similar way here, we can do, all right, let's copy this. Copy it from here. This is a system.error.println exception, but this time it's going to be the arithmetic exception because that's what we're bringing in. Okay, that's going to come in from there. Okay, so that's going to end the catch. That's going to end the try. That's going to end the class. Okay, so now it's just going to help us that if I run this like this and enter a 6-0, that's going to give me that by 0 error. Okay. Again, we haven't caught the error. I mean, we've caught the error. We've exited gracefully. But if we want to give the user the ability to do something else, okay, what happens is whenever you see an exception, it's going to try that when it hits, it's going to end the try immediately. So there's no loop here. There's no idea to go back. And once it handles, once it does this, it's going to move beyond this. Okay. So there's no way for it to go back into the try. It can't try again. I can do more inside of my catch, but once it's done, it's done. Okay. So if I want to make a loop, I'm going to have to put this whole thing inside of a do loop. Okay. So before the try, I can do a do. I know I don't like do's, but sometimes they're useful. In this case, they are useful. To move all this over. If we'd have known this in advance, it'd been a little easier, but you know, we'll figure it out. Okay, so all of that. And then we're going to have down here, we're going to end that do while with our while. We need something. We have to add a Boolean called continue loop. Okay, all it's going to do is tell us whether or not we need to do that. Okay, and we're going to do that by starting up here in our try. Okay, so we're going to have to first set, actually back up here, we're going to have to set up this variable. We have to say Boolean continue loop. is equal to true. Okay, so it'll actually, it's going to work the first time anyway, but our default is that it's going to be true. Okay, and all this is going to be the same, except that if we get to the end here, if we get to to line 25, where my cursor is at now, it means there have been no exceptions. Okay, so then we can say that continue loop is equal to false. Okay, which means when it gets to this while, it'll just continue to go on. It won't repeat. Okay, but in other cases, it is going to repeat. Okay, so what we want to happen here then. So let's say we're on this type input mismatch. We've given the nice little error message we had before. Okay, but we need to clear out the scanner. So we need to do a scanner dot next line. Okay, which is going to clear out everything that's there. And that way there won't be any stuff left over. The new line character and all that can give us trouble. Okay, and then we're going to do a system dot out dot print line. Actually do a printf, but it doesn't matter. We're going to say you must enter integers. Let's try again. The reason they do that is they want to do %n%n. Okay. And in that case, we don't need the arguments since there's nothing to fill in. Okay. So that's going to clear out the scanner so it'll work properly. That's going to give the error message with more detail. You must enter integer. Please try again. 2 new lines. It's going to take us back up. Okay, now it's going to come down past all of this, hit the while, continue loop is still true. It goes back up and asks us to enter the numbers again. Okay. And in a similar way down here, when we're not doing strings, we don't have to worry about, we're not getting that clog up in the scanner like we did before. Okay. So here, all we have to do is do a system.out.printf here. I'm going to print out 0. Is it invalid? Denominator. Please try again. Control N, Control or %n for 2 new line characters. And again, we don't need that, but that is a string. Okay. And that should be good. Okay. So now we're not only exiting gracefully, we're actually going to deal with the issues. Okay. So again, if I do a 5 and a 2, we're good. Run it again. I do a 5 and a 0. Okay. It's going to ask me to enter. It's going to go back up. Please try again. Okay. Now it's going to do a 5 and a 2. And yeah, my output's a little funky. I'm not sure what I'm probably missing a new line character somewhere. Not sure where I'm missing it, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. But it does allow us to correct it. Okay, is the basic idea to get our results. And again, I can do, if I enter Bob or Bobo, if you want, it's going to ask me again. So I can do a 5. And if I do something else, like, oh no, do it again. So, but I've got to go back and do the whole thing over again and do a 5-2. Okay. So again, it's not perfect, but we are starting to do some of those exceptions. Okay. So the book then talks about some other things here. It talks about when you would want to do exceptions, do the exception handling. Okay. And basically, if you're looking, when you're running the program and looking for there to be runtime errors, okay, then that's when this happens. Okay. If you're doing something else, if you're doing something like if you're running threads, if you're doing something I/O through networking, then it's a different thing. Okay. 11.5 talks about the Java exception hierarchy. and that's on page 466. It's all, we've talked about interfaces last chapter. There's a throwable interface that it's going to be implemented on all the kinds of errors. So throwable is either an exception or an error. Then it's a runtime exception, IO exception, thread death, virtual machine error, those things. What we care about is the exceptions and the runtime exceptions. And that gets us into the all the things we're doing, the array index out of bounds exception, the input mismatch exception, those kinds of things. Okay. A lot of detail there I'm not going to ask you about, but just so it's kind of so you know. Okay. On page 469, it talks about the finally block. The finally block works kind of like it does in a case statement, that it's optional and it's going to happen. It's after the last catch block. It's going to happen whether or not an exception occurs. So either way, it's going to happen, okay, which allows you typically to release resources that you may need to, okay? And you can read about that if you want. Again, we're probably not going to do that much, okay? 11.7 talks about stack unwinding and obtaining information from an exception. We're not going to go through that. I mean, you can read it, but I'm not going to ask you about that. I think we've got too much to do this time of the semester to get into that level of detail. Okay. Same thing with chained exceptions and declaring new exception types. Read it. We're not really going to cover that. Okay. The stuff in 11.10 and 11.11 is pretty useful. Okay. And they don't really do much with it, which I think is interesting. They don't really give much of an example, but it's just the idea that you can add preconditions to a method and you can use the assert. I think the books used an assert before. An assert just basically is if something's true, good. If not, it's going to stop execution. Okay. So the precondition is what must be true when the method's invoked, and a postcondition is true after the method it's returns. Okay. And you can throw exceptions when these preconditions are not met. Okay. And again, it doesn't really give examples of that, so we're not going to do much with it. But again, then it talks in 11.11 about the assertions. Okay, that when you use the assert, there's a couple of methods for doing that. You can either assert some expression, or you can assert expression 1 and expression 2, which will evaluate expression 1 and throw an assertion error with expression 2 as the message if expression 1 is false. It does give an example of a basic assert there. Okay. The 11.12 try with resources, automatic resource deallocation. Don't worry about, don't care about that. Okay. So that's it for chapter 11. Again, we took a somewhat abbreviated view. Time is short. We're going to skip. We're not going to kiss anything. We're going to skip 12 and 13. And the next thing we'll talk about next week is going to be chapter 14. Okay. Again, the homework problem this time is one that I made up. I think it's pretty straightforward. It should not take a long time. But as always, if you have questions, make sure that you let me know.